The first thing we have to do is we have to ban handguns in Canada, and we've been after this for years.
Who's that clever fellow? Why, he's the Attorney General of Ontario, who came up with the novel idea of let's just ban guns. Then there won't be any crime. Why don't you ban hateful feelings and sadness at the same time? Because I guess criminals would follow those laws. What a fool. Joining me now from the United States is perhaps the world's greatest expert on gun laws and how they don't work. His name is Professor John Lott. He's in Nashville. He's the author of More Guns, Less Crime and the Bias Against Guns. Professor Lott, welcome back to the program.
Great to talk to you again.
So we had this big shootout in a Toronto neighborhood called Scarborough. 2 dead, 10 times that many wounded. Looks like there's some gang violence involved here. Obviously illegal handguns. And all the Attorney General can come up with is, well, maybe we should ban guns. Why is he wrong, Professor?
Well, I mean, there are 2 main points to make here. One is, if you're talking about drug gangs fighting against each other, the ability to go and stop these drug gangs from getting drugs, we know how difficult and impossible that's been. But the notion that somehow you're going to stop them from getting a hold of the guns that they go and use to protect those valuable items is just as difficult. I mean, just as they could smuggle in illegal drugs, they're going to be able to smuggle in the weapons that they use to protect those valuable drugs. And we see that even in island nations which don't have any neighbor that they can go and blame it on. The second issue is if you go and ban guns, you have to ask yourself who's most likely to obey those laws. And what's going to happen is it's going to be the good, law-abiding citizens who turn in their guns and not the criminals. And rather than making places safer for the would-be victims, you actually make it safer for the criminals who want to go and commit crimes. I mean, Canada can look at many places around the world. I can't find a place, any place around the world, that's banned guns and seen murder rates go down. Murder rates either go up at least a little bit, but often a huge, several-fold or more increase. You need to only look at Chicago and Washington, D.C. If you look at Washington, D.C.'s murder rates before the beginning of 1977 when we banned handguns, Washington, D.C. would rank someplace around 15th to 20th in terms of the top 50 cities in terms of murder rates. After the ban went into effect, half the time it was either number 1 or number 2, and 2/3 of the time it was in the top 4 cities in the United States in terms of murder rates. D.C.'s murder rate soared not only relative to its own murder rate, but also went up dramatically relative to other places. Same story in Chicago. When you look around the world, you have island nations, kind of the ideal test case. And the 3rd edition of More Guns, Less Crime provides graphs and charts as well as data sources for people who would be interested in looking at this. And what you see in Jamaica, for example, you see basically about a 5 to 6-fold increase in murder rates after the gun ban went into effect. Ireland, a similar huge increase. The UK banned handguns in January 1997. And if you look over the next 14 years, murder rates were never lower than they were prior to the ban going into effect.
Well, Professor, if it doesn't work, if you're saying you've studied countries around the world, and obviously you have, you're clearly the leading gun control scholar in the world. You've published many books on it. If every single case study you've investigated shows that banning guns simply doesn't work, in fact, usually makes it worse, why do politicians go there? Why does this buffoonish Attorney General, his first thing out of his mouth is pass a new law to ban guns?
All right, well, I think there are 2 reasons for it. One is if you see a crime and you see a gun is used in the commission of crime, the normal reaction is, well, if I just ban guns, that's going to make the crime go away. The problem is they don't see defensive gun uses. They don't see the fact that individuals aren't going to be able to protect themselves from criminals. Let me just give you a simple example. Let's say a violent criminal was seriously threatening you or your family. I mean, really seriously threatening you. Would you feel safer putting a sign out in front of your home that said, this home is a gun-free zone? Would that make it less likely that the criminal would go in because he said, well, guns aren't allowed in there, I'm not going to take it in? No, the opposite would happen. That rather than keeping the criminal from going in, those types of signs would actually be a magnet, would actually cause the criminal to be more likely to go in there and commit the crime. One of the problems that you have in Canada is that you have all these gun lock requirements where people are required to keep their guns in safes that make it very difficult for them to be able to go and access them for self-defense. And you can see when states in the United States have passed similar types of laws, and we have 17 states that do, what happens is immediately after those laws get passed, you start seeing criminals being more likely to attack people in their homes, to break in when the residents are there, and being more successful in committing violent crimes against the people living in those homes. And you see it not just in the United States, but you see it in other places around the world which have adopted similar types of laws. So you have to ask yourself, why, who's going to obey these laws? And if you disarm law-abiding citizens relative to criminals, you have to understand you can have the opposite of what you'd like to have happen occur.
Professor Lott, I very much appreciate your information. If folks want more, you can check out Professor Lott's books, The Bias Against Guns and More Guns, Less Crime. Thanks, Professor. We'll talk to you again soon.
Great to talk to you.
Folks.